And okay, it's 5 minutes after 2, so it's time to open our session. So hello everyone, once again, welcome and thank you for participating in the CEP online series of the workshop on dedicated topics. My name is Jana Špero, I'm a Secretary General of CEP, and today I will be moderating this session. Today with me, I have my dear colleagues from the CEP office and Ms. Mirka Jakešova, who is a CEP policy officer, will be my assistant during this webinar. We also have our colleague Anna Esquera, who is also our policy officer, and Ms. Marie Klassen, our colleague from CEP office. I'm also very proud to say that today among the participants, we have the president of CEP, Ms. Annie de Vos. So Madam President, thank you for being with us. I want to welcome all of you, dear participants, who decided to spend 45 minutes of your very, very busy schedule today with us. Thank you so much for being here. This is a very special opportunity for us. This is something completely new. As most of you know, CEP is an oldest umbrella organization that is connecting probation services in Europe. We are established in 1981, and every day from 1981 till today, we are trying to find something new that can help our dear colleagues, our dear friends, our dear probation family, as we like to call all probation practitioners. So for the year 2024, we found a new format that we hope will be good for you. So this is the series of the webinars that we are planning to have on the same time throughout the year. So the webinars will go every third Thursday of the every second month during this year. So this today is our big opening, grand opening. So thank you all for being the pioneers of this new kind of a concept. So we will start every time at 2 p.m. and we hope that this format of a short presentation with a certain topic will be something good for the practitioners. So we hope that more and more people can participate, learn something, but at the same time that they don't have to reschedule the total day of their work. So let me just tell you that the next webinar will be in March, and the topic for the March will be about the radicalization and violent extremism. Then the next one will be in May, when we will talk about the technology in the probation services. We will give you a free summer, so July and August will be free of our webinars, but we will be back with the super interesting topics back in September when we will talk about the assessment in probation, and we will finalize the year with the November one where we will talk about the volunteers in the probation services. Let me also highlight that CEP is running an international Erasmus Plus project regarding the volunteers in the probation, so the last webinar of this year will also be important for you to hear what's cooking in the Europe on this topic. So having said that, I am very, very proud to say that we had more than 80 participants registering for this first webinar. So not just that we have a great number of participation, but also we have 27 countries. And this time we went even beyond the Europe because we have some participants that are connecting outside of the scope of Europe and of the Council of Europe countries. So thank you so much for giving us your trust. I promise I will not talk very long, but like every gathering of the family, we have to have some house rules. So please listen to me carefully. It's nothing very hard, but please bear in mind. We decided that this meeting will have a meeting format, not a typical webinar for Zoom, because we like more this family setting. We want to see each other. It's nicer for the beginning that you see our faces, that we see your faces. So this is why we chose this kind of a settings. The second important thing is that we see that most of you that I can see now quickly already have your full name. If you don't have your full name, please be so kind and put your full name for your Zoom account. It's very easy to change it. You have a 3 dots in the right corner and you can change your name. Please put your name. And it would be really good if you put your country because of this diversity that we have. We have 27 countries. So especially for the time when we will have questions and answers, it would be good to know the country that you are coming from. Also, when I mentioned that we will have a discussion, this is the beauty of this kind of format, because we will have a short presentation from our dear colleague Fiona. And after her presentation, there will be a time for discussion that will be led by my colleague Mirka. What you need to know is that we have 2 possibilities how you can be active during this session. So one is that you are welcome to write down your questions in the chat while you are listening to the presentation. So if you are more of a typing person, if you don't want to go orally with your questions, please type it in the chat. If you would like to go and talk, then we ask you to wait for the end of the presentation while we will have our part dedicated for the discussion. Then you can ask your question by raising your virtual hand, and then when you are given a floor, you can ask your question. Well, we want more of you to really be active. We want this to be a nice discussion among colleagues. So please, if you don't have a question, you can also come with a comment. The comment can be something that is happening in your country. Do you have some similarities with what you heard from our presenter, Fiona? Or do you like something that you heard? Do you think that this would be something that would be good for your country? So all the comments are really welcome. Of course, a few more things we need to know. It's that while we have Fiona presenting, please, this is the time when we ask you all to turn off your camera. So we will open the cameras when we are in the discussion part, but like this, it's going to be easier to follow Fiona's presentation. And during the whole time, please mute yourself if you are not talking. Of course, when you are talking, you should not be muted. But if you are not talking, please mute yourself just to be sure that we can hear clear. Also, I need to mention that everything that we talk here, it's recorded, as we will be placing this to the CEP YouTube channel. So if you have a colleagues that you think that could benefit from this session, but they couldn't join us for any reason, please, you can tell them that they can find this on the CEP YouTube channel. Also, in the end of the session, we would like to take a family photo. We will have one screenshot that we will report on our CEP web pages and in our social media accounts. So please, if you are not happy with being on a family photo, just turn off your camera and it will be fine. You won't be in a family photo. So now, finally, I can tell you something more about our topic for today. So today we are starting with our speaker, as I said, Ms. Fiona Deacon. She is a senior probation officer and a strategic leader for women within Greater Manchester, England and Wales. His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service. I have to say, it's still for me very strange to say His Majesty. I'm so learned in my brain to say Her Majesty, but okay, it's His Majesty. Okay, so Fiona, she joined the service in 2008, and soon after that, she focused her interest on women. She worked in a number of roles as a practitioner, also as a manager, but she always put some focus on alternatives to women and thinking about what can be different for them, how many of them are represented among the probation clients. And she came and developed the idea of alternatives to custody for women. And this is something that we will hear about today, how she developed and how is implemented the Women's Problem-Solving Court that dates from 2014. So having said that, it's my pleasure and honor to give the floor to Fiona. Fiona, the floor is yours. Please be so kind to share your presentation with us.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Jana. Let me just share my content. Bear with me. Okay, this is the point where I assume you can see. If you can't, please do shout out and I'll double check the technology. Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you everyone for joining me this afternoon and for giving up your time to hear me talk today. And thank you to the CP for inviting me. I feel like this is maybe a long time coming. I originally should have presented at an award ceremony in 2017, but struggled to attend because of childcare. But it's the same topic, so I'm very pleased to say that I'm still here talking about the Women's Problem-Solving Court. So thank you for remembering me and for inviting me to be part of today's webinar. So as you know, I'm Fiona Deacon, and I'm a Senior Probation Officer, which will be sort of the equivalent of a senior practitioner. But I also have the strategic lead for Women for Greater Manchester. And what that means essentially is that I have oversight of the women in Greater Manchester whilst they're in the criminal justice system. So that's focusing on what we see when women are coming through the courts and sentences that are passed, hence the problem-solving court. But also looking more broadly about the offer that we have within the community for women, whether we have gender-specific requirements and how we link women into women's specialist services. And then for women who do receive custodial sentences, looking at how we support women to return back to the Greater Manchester area and what community integration means for us. So I've got a few slides to share with you and quite a brief video as well, which Merck is going to assist me with. And what I'd like to essentially do is highlight what the problem-solving court is for women, how it's evolved over the 10 years now, and then how we measure success. So just going to put this slide up, but before I come to the model and how it works in practice and what the process is, I'd just like to add some background really. So some of these statistics might seem familiar to you if you work with women in the justice system or have been in the justice system or are researching women in the justice system. But for me as a practitioner, when I was working with women and men, I would quite clearly see that disparity in sentences passed to women through the courts. Sometimes it was really clear you'd have a couple that were convicted together, so co-accused, and the woman would receive a short custodial sentence and the man would receive a robust community sentence with maybe a curfew or community service or drug rehabilitation requirements. And so it was really difficult to kind of understand that thinking. And similarly, for men, there were a number of programs, rehabilitative type programs that men could complete. There were 3 or 4. So you could refer and assess a male person through the courts for a program. And if they weren't suitable or they'd completed it, there was always another program that you could look to before the order became so onerous that custody was the only option. For women, there was one program. It was called the Women's Program. It was one size fits all, and it was longer than other courses. And so for women, if they'd had the opportunity to complete that as their sentence and struggled to complete it for whatever reason, they were more likely to be looking at a custodial sentence sooner than men. And so it wasn't what is maybe sometimes thought, in my experience. Sometimes it seems as though magistrates and sentences might think women are doubly deviant. What I found in practice is that the magistrates had limited options when they were sentencing women. So for me, I was looking at something that would give sentences an alternative to custody. So for those women reaching custody sooner than men, what else can we offer the courts as a viable option? So I was looking for something that would address not only the offending behaviour and the offence that was committed, but also the root cause of the crime as well. So as the statistics show you, that most women in custody do not present a risk of harm to the public. And in fact, there's quite a lot of women that are more of a risk to themselves than others. I'm thinking about women generally, 51% of the population, but 9% of the criminal justice system in England and Wales. That's just odd to me, so that it's not 50-50. I think what it does do is maybe highlight the woman's place in society, maybe gender-based violence. And so, unsurprisingly, a lot of the women that we meet in the criminal justice system are victims first, and also present with a lot of vulnerabilities. So a lot of this is underlying the offending behaviour that we then see. So the aims for me in designing the problem-solving court approach for women was to reduce the short custodial sentence, reduce reoffending, which is always a goal of probation, of course, but also to improve that understanding of trauma, the impact trauma might have on decisions that people make, and also a bit broader than the criminal justice system, but to look at that social injustice that women are facing before the criminal justice system as well. So what we've had since 2014, so coming on to 10 years this summer, is we've had a number of women who are returning to court for non-statutory problem-solving court reviews. And they're doing that whilst they're sentenced to a community order or a suspended sentence order. And so the one thing that makes a problem-solving court order different to anything else that we have is that non-statutory review. That's the tangible difference, really. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it looks like in practice and the journey for the woman. And so we have set criteria that we follow to assess suitability for the problem-solving court. The woman would need to be at risk of custody or a medium to high level community order or suspended sentence order, and have multiple complex needs. So not exhaustive to this list, but this is what we would often see women would present with. And this criteria has changed and varied over the 10 years. We did originally focus at risk of custody only, but we did broaden this. And we were also quite, we would say sort of 4 or more needs, but there was always a woman that maybe had 3 needs, and we could see that overall she would benefit from this approach. So we've just varied our wording as we've evolved and developed. And so it's more often than not the pre-sentence report author in the court that's identifying suitable women. And that's because through that pre-sentence report process, there's the need to assess the risk, the need, who the person poses a risk to, look at the sentencing guidelines. And so the pre-sentence report authors are following guidance through what we call the EPF, which is the Effective Practice Framework, and quite simply enter in some static data about, the gender, the offence that was committed. And so the EPF will produce problem-solving court as a proposal. So it's usually the PSR author, but it isn't limited to that. All court users really would play a part in identifying suitable women. So quite often it would be the solicitor that would try and stand up quite early in the morning to say, this woman would be suited for the problem-solving court approach. Maybe that would be sort of swifter process to get the court proceedings dealt with that day. It might be that it's the magistrates who are sat there sentencing, but could be panel members of the problem-solving court and recognise this is probably the type of order that would suit this woman, or maybe mental health or support agencies around the court as well. Just to kind of note as well around gender identity. So we've varied the wording probably in the last 3 years. We would have called ourselves previously the female problem-solving court, but we've now renamed ourselves the problem-solving court for women, because if anyone identifies as a woman, then that is sort of criteria they would be eligible for the problem-solving court approach as well. So women need to be a resident of Greater Manchester. We did start off with just one particular area of Manchester. It is Greater Manchester wide now, and sentenced to either the magistrates or the Crown Court. And again, started off at magistrates, broadened out to Crown Court. And when we talk about motivated to address their problems, I think I feel like everyone that I would meet through the criminal justice system would know that if maybe X, Y, and Z was addressed, it wouldn't have resulted in this situation. So if a woman has been found guilty after trial, but they are willing to address the social factors and the circumstances that were surrounding that situation, then for us that would be enough motivation. We're not looking for someone to be fully accepting of the offence, but as long as they can see that maybe a bit of social support around that area, that would be suitable criteria as well. So the sentence process then, just kind of thinking about it step by step. So it's at that court stage, at sentence stage, that the woman, she is part of that process. She's been assessed, she's been interviewed. Sometimes it happens very quickly in a magistrate's court. Sometimes it's over a longer period, maybe in a Crown Court. But the woman would have been asked whether she agrees to attend reviews as part of her court order. The court order is very bespoke depending on whatever the offence is. So we have some women who are on quite, a lower level, although we're facing medium to high level community order. It could be that they're looking at a 9-month community order with rehabilitation activities and reviews. And then we will have some women who are on maybe a 2-year suspended sentence order with maybe a curfew or unpaid work, or maybe drug rehabilitation. It's very much based on what the person is bringing to the court arena and what the sentencing guidance would tell us. So when the woman has been through that court process, we would hand some materials to further explain, this is what's going to happen next. This is what your review is about. This is what it looks like. And then on starting the community order, the woman would be allocated to a practitioner. And what we have within Greater Manchester is the whole system approach for women. And I'll try and sort of make sure I cover this in a bit more detail later, but essentially that woman would be supervised by a practitioner who's part of the women's team, who's often working with women and co-locates from the Women's Centre. And so it will be that practitioner that then will produce a progress report, and the woman would be asked to return to court within 8 weeks for her first review. We always ask that the woman comes back in person. It's a really good way to build that relationship. But we also accept that that can be a struggle for many reasons. And so there is a remote dial-in option that the Women's Centre would support us with. So once the woman returns for her first review, she'll then meet the magistrates, and we have a dedicated bench of magistrates who have all volunteered for the role. They kind of want to look at what happens next, what happens post-sentence. And I think for a lot of them, that's part of the appeal of being a magistrate, to support people to make changes and, change their position in society. And so those magistrates are building a relationship with that woman. They know what the offence is, but they want to know her, what's of interest to her, what's going to support her. And so they then help the woman to set small, achievable goals. We then set the next review. The woman will return to completing the other aspects of the order and then come back to court and carry on that conversation. Our ideal model, which is what I've just described, would have the same bench every time, meeting the same women and keeping that relationship going. But we do have issues with attendance rates at the reviews. Not every woman is going to show up every time on time. That isn't the kind of world they were living in before, and it hasn't changed overnight. And equally, the magistrates will struggle to stick to that routine rota of attending to see the same women. But generally, in the main, that's the kind of process that we would follow. So thinking a bit about who we meet, and I was having a little look at the data earlier today. So we currently have 122 women across Greater Manchester who are part of the problem-solving court approach. At the moment, 25% of those were sentenced in the Crown Court, which is a bit low for us. It's usually around the 35% mark. So that's something I'm quite conscious of. And then the offence types, we tend to have quite a lot of acquisitive offending, which would normally attract short custodial sentences if it was routine. But we do have low-level violent offences as well. And one of those that stands out quite a lot at the moment, which we're kind of thinking about and analysing, is assault an emergency worker. And I think that while we completely accept that to be assaulted in your line of work is not acceptable, that woman, when being restrained, has lashed out. And I think that what that shows us, what we know it shows us, is that when women have faced trauma in their past, the feeling of being restrained is quite triggering and re-traumatizing. And so we then see that coming through the courts with these offences. What we have at the moment, what I think we've always had an issue with, particularly what I recall seeing a lot of as a practitioner, is that we have a disproportionate number of women who are on suspended sentence orders. So although we are offering an alternative to custody and we are providing that to the courts, we still see quite a lot of women who are sentenced to a suspended sentence order instead of a community order. And I suppose there's something there about there still being that umbrella or that custody element hanging over somebody's head should they not comply. And I think what's quite interesting is that we see more of those within the magistrates' court as opposed to the Crown Court, where the more serious offences would be escalated. Okay, I'm just going to talk a little bit about who else we work with, how we sustain ourselves, and some various points where we have evolved over the years. So from the start, HMCTS have been our key partners. We jointly own the problem-solving court approach. It wasn't a Ministry of Justice pilot. It was something that we uniquely developed in Greater Manchester in response to what we could see happening for women in our area. So since 2014, we've been supported by HMCTS, but also our women's centres. We have long-standing relationships with local women's centres. We have had a co-working model with the women's centres for a while, and that's been more sort of firmed up and more established over the last few years. But the women's centres within those early years supported us so much with multi-agency meetings, so getting the woman and a number of partners around the table to help develop a sentence plan to present back to the sentencers in order to pass the problem-solving court approach sentence. That has changed. We've evolved. We can now make quite swift decisions through courts without the round-the-table approach, but we still have those relationships and that support there. So from 2017, which is the point where I left, went on maternity leave, and my colleague took this to just new heights. It was incredible. She rolled this out over to 2 further magistrates' courts, which made it a full Greater Manchester approach and got rid of the sort of postcode lottery that some women would face. At this time, Greater Manchester Combined Authority, so they are our council, our local authority, they were developing their whole system approach for women, of which the problem-solving court is a big part. It fits in quite neatly with the whole system approach. So whereas they look at the broad process of women at risk of criminal justice, we were then offering the alternative to custody for those when they were in the system. And we now have sort of joint board meetings with HMCTS, the combined authority, also benefit now from data analysis, looking at those wider social needs that were already my original aims, thinking about what else we can do, out of court disposals, how we can make the most of this framework to support women in various parts of the criminal justice system, what it is that we're learning about gender-based violence. And then also at this time, the women's centres firmed up their relationships and they formed an alliance. So they came together. We have 9 women's centres that cover 10 areas of Greater Manchester. And although individually they are charity-based, they, coming together as an alliance gave them a stronger foundation to apply for funding and to be sustainable as well. I haven't noted it on here, but in 2019, we then rolled out to the Crown Court, which was where we started to pick up some more of the more serious offences, the true alternative to custody. And 2021, as it says on here, we've then developed a bit further again, where locally within probation, Greater Manchester developed the integrated rehabilitation services. which is more of a formal contract management approach to working with our partners. Fortunately for me and everyone involved with the women's side of things, it's the same relationship, same organizations, but I think it definitely will support the sustainability of everything that we do. For everyone involved in this, we are continuously rolling out, revisiting what it means to be trauma aware, and how all users of the court are sort of like applying that into their practice and thinking about trauma whilst they're supporting the women as well. So the current operating model today, so we really had to go back to the drawing board with the pandemic. We pretty much had to rewrite the model. As with most things in the court arena, we were paused. We couldn't host reviews. We couldn't obviously have a number of people coming into the courts. And for the courts themselves, it wasn't priority business, which we completely understand. So the model that we have in place today is that we now have all the Greater Manchester magistrates and Crown courts passing the problem-solving court sentence for women that meet that criteria. We have 3 magistrates courts that host reviews. And so we're hosting reviews about 4 or 5 times a month, depending on the scheduling. We've got a dedicated bench of magistrates. We have about 26 that sit on that bench. And they, as well as attending and receiving access to all the trauma-informed training and awareness, they also have their own panel meetings, and we'll hear from experts in their area. So it might be that somebody working with young adults will attend and give an overview of what work they're doing with women specifically, or maybe like the unpaid work lead or drug rehabilitation services. So we're trying to kind of support the magistrates to understand what else is going on for the woman while she's within the criminal justice system. We've got our dedicated court staff. They are the problem-solving court leads, but they do this alongside their day-to-day court job. So they ensure that we have the women are invited, that the lists are all clear, that we know who's expected, and they have a full day listing where they support the women to dial in, and often sometimes support with the conversations, provide the magistrates with a bit more information. They kind of really do a really good job to keep the operation running. And then we have the practitioners who are based in the community and supporting the women alongside the women's centres, where the woman's probably also got a co-worker. They do an awful lot for the reports. They actually produce the reports, but they may come along occasionally to support a woman on the day. And then the legal advisors, they are there to oversee the whole operation, to provide the magistrates with support again, and to ensure that we together are just overcoming any barriers or objectives that we face. And we do have challenges. Attendance is an issue. But in coming back from the pandemic with recovery, we also lost one of our courtrooms, which was what we would call the most trauma-informed courtroom, if ever you could have a trauma-informed courtroom. And at the moment, we have a courtroom with a dock, which wouldn't be our preference. So we do what we can to cover it up. But these are kind of some of the consequences, I think, of having to restart again with a model. Okay. So just thinking about how we measure success, and this is a bit of a brief slide. I think that's probably how it feels for me at the moment in terms of qualitative feedback, speaking to the women involved, getting that real, true co-delivery, co-design, collaboration. It's something that I had a lot of at the start, asking women, what would make a difference for you and how is it going? But with lockdown, we've had to kind of just come back. So there are a few gaps here for me, but I think there's some hope that we are going to have some lived experience joining us soon. Ideally, for me, I would want to work alongside women who've been through the problem-solving courts, who can tell me what worked well and actually what wasn't so good, so that we can be sure that we're delivering the best service. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is stop sharing my slide. And I'm going to ask Mirka if you would mind bringing up the video for me, and I will just introduce it. Excellent. So before we play the video, I just want to kind of give you the background here. So we've been we're in our 10th year, but it's the Ministry of Justice have piloted other problem solving courts called the Intensive Supervision Court. And so to support that pilot, we spoke to a woman who'd been through the problem solving court to kind of talk about what it meant for her, and thinking about more about how we measure success as well, and what success looks like. So this is a clip of a news article. So it starts with the reporter talking, so you won't catch the first few lines, so apologies for that, but then you'll hear from the woman who's been through the order herself.
Now, in other news, the female prison population could rise by a third in the next 3 years, according to a report out today from the Justice Committee. One alternative to a custodial sentence is a so-called problem-solving court, and one's about to open in Liverpool. It's based on a model trialled in Manchester, giving more women community sentences if they tackle addiction head-on. Our social affairs correspondent Kelly Foran reports.
Maria was in an abusive relationship, turned to alcohol and ended up in trouble with the police for handling stolen goods. She was spared jail. How do you think you would have coped had you have been sent to prison instead?
I didn't want to live anyway, so I think that would have just been my life over. I don't think I would have coped with that. I wasn't strong enough.
She has to check in every 6 weeks to the magistrate's court over an 18-month period and tackle her addictions, which she says she's done.
I got given a chance and obviously not going to prison. That would have killed me basically, but this is a bit of a wake-up call.
Part of the programme is regular work with probation officers and visits to women's centres. How has Maria changed since you first started working with her?
Massively changed. So from one end of the scale to the other, having the recognition from the magistrates each time she's appeared every 6 weeks has been really big difference. She's like a completely different person now.
But if they don't follow the rules, people can end up being sent to prison for up to 28 days.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Just worth mentioning, the Intensive Supervision Court have the ability to breach women and to activate custodial sentences. That isn't something that we have within this model. Just conscious that that's the last bit that you hear in that video. I've also just spotted the time, so I'm aware that I probably need to get through my slides. So yeah, some of the areas that we think about: are we re-traumatizing women by asking women to come back to court? We are very flexible in our approach in that we will offer the ability to dial in remotely via the Women's Centre if returning felt too traumatic. But then how does that sort of affect the overall compliance? What I know is important for myself, for the magistrates, for everyone involved in the process, is that women are completing their community order, and we're doing everything we can to encourage the engagement within the review process as well. And I'm just going to take us to my last slide, which I can see has slightly merged a little bit there. I'll make sure that the version that I send out doesn't cover successful completions, because that's quite important. But thinking about the statistics and the data, we're really fortunate in Greater Manchester. We do have the lowest reoffending rate for women in England and Wales, and the other areas that I identified there have got the similar size population. Successful completions, it's always around the 58 to 60% mark for us, which is, it's seen as quite good in the criminal justice system when you think about the kind of complexities and the needs that individuals are bringing into the reviews and into the court. But we do still have that disproportionate suspended sentence orders as well. So we had a cost benefit analysis within the first 6 months of the problem solving court, and it was socio-economic savings. So big numbers there, over £17 to be saved, but it's socio-economic. So it's thinking about the cost of custody, cost of NHS services, children's services as well. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you all very much for your time this afternoon.